you being a Dominican, you came in here to say that you've watched my content and you agree. So I guess my question to you, why do you think it is that a lot of black people in Dominican Republic claim that they're not black, from your understanding?
The reason that we don't embrace our blackness and we hide from it is because we're ashamed of it and we don't want to embrace it. I was brainwashed to believe, and I was one of those fellow Dominicans that was like that. Oh, I know black, I know black. And it's a big problem. It's really taboo, and it's good to bring light to it. We've been taught that the darker you are, the eviler you are. We've been programmed to believe that the darker you are, it's bad, it's evil.
Why do you think that there's denial in what you just shared? Because I agree with you, by the way.
I was one of those kids saying that too until I found out those people are my people. We're the same.
I always knew that it came from a place of self-hate. I always
It's
knew that.
always self-hate. Yeah, it always starts from that because we're ashamed. That's why I feel like we're more divided than ever because now we're fighting within our people when we're the same.
There was an individual, he was a Mexican guy too, and he was trying to convince me that all Mexicans have a mixture of European. And I said, how about let's prove it to each other? Let's take a DNA test. I had already taken it, so I already knew the result. So of course I took it and there was 0% European. I showed it to him and I said, show me your results. He had 0% European. And
Wow.
he said this, check me out. It's important for me to say because this is always a point of argument for a lot of people. He said, but this can't be true because we speak Spanish and we have Spanish names. And I said, I don't think you know how colonialism works.
I agree. Like, I was one of those people brainwashed. Little did we know, like, this is not our heritage. This is something about the people that took over us, that ruled us, that put us here, you know?
One of the things that has allowed me as a Mexican to understand the colorism and racism in Mexico is to not be biased and not be in denial more than anything. Don't be in denial about the situation. Once you start personalizing it as if Mexico belongs to me, so I must protect the reputation and the image of it. Oh, well, no, that's not true about Mexico. No, it's true. Stop being in denial. There is anti-blackness. There's anti-indigeneity in Mexico. Stop lying to yourself. And I think that's a lot of the problem. We try our best to protect the image of the country. We try to protect the image of the country more than the actual people. I asked the Dominican, are you black or Dominican first? And exactly his body language and his expression was, ooh, that's a hard one, bro. You put me in a tight spot. And I said, why is it difficult? He's like, it's not easy to answer. I said, okay. I said, ask me now. Are you indigenous or are you Mexican first? Let me answer it for you. I said, I'm indigenous first before any country. Now, why? Because I side with my people. I know who my people are, regardless of border. My people are the indigenous people of this land. No matter if you're indigenous living in Guatemala, Peru, we're indigenous people. I'm not going to allow the colonizer's border or idea of colony and country to divide us. Now, why is it so easy for me to answer and not easy for you to answer that? And I had a Haitian on here and I said, can I bring you up to ask you a question? And she said, sure. I brought her up and I asked her the same question. I said, are you black or Haitian first? She says, I'm black first. I said, why? She says, because my people are black people. I said, so now you being Dominican, let me ask you the same question.
It doesn't matter in which nation I am. If I am black, I am black.
Hmm?
People is going to see me as black. They're not going to see that I'm Dominican or I'm Puerto Rican or I'm Cuban. The first thing that they're going to see is that I'm black.
If you talk bad about indigenous people of Peru, you're talking about me. If you talk bad about indigenous people of Puerto Rico, you're talking about me. If you're talking bad about the indigenous people of Guatemala, you're talking about me. That's how I know who my people are. That's how I know how to identify. If you talking about white people of Mexico, you ain't talking about me.
No, exactly, yeah.
If you're talking about white people of Guatemala, of Peru, you're not talking about me.
No.
I do this.
Yeah.
So I know who my people are. It's easy. There is no puzzle. There's nothing to figure out. When I ask a Dominican, are you black or are you Dominican first? And if he has a difficult time answering that, you don't know who your people are. You're conflicted.
Yeah.
You being black presenting When you hear a non-black person talking bad about black people, are they talking bad about you?
Yeah, and the best example is that every time that you see a video about gringos speaking about black people,
Yeah.
you get pissed.
There you go.
That's how they see me.
It's not really difficult to figure this out. Let me ask you one final question.
Sure.
Right now that I ask you if you're black or Dominican first and you said black, is it safe to say that a lot of Dominicans, if they watch this video, they're going to say, she's not really Dominican, she's Haitian?
Oh, she's a traitor. She's an haitiana. She's a vende patria. You receive a lot of hate.
So why are you considered a sellout because you choose to identify as black? Why? Why is that selling out?
El colonialismo está tan internalizado y es tan sistemático. Hay un refrán que dice, como en un mundo de hipócritas, el honesto siempre es el malo. En un mundo de gente que está dormida, el que se despierta es el que disrupt the peace. El hecho de que ellos se choquen con su realidad de una forma tan abrupta y para el que el sistema en el cual ellos se criaron se encargaron de que nunca sucediese fuerte. Tú lo ves hasta con lástima con el tiempo. Te da mucha pena. Es algo muy jodido. Tú no sabes quién tú eres.
I find it interesting that the Dominicans that don't like Haitians, the way that they justify it is, well, it's because they invaded us.
Yeah.
And that response is precisely why I asked, are you black or Dominican first? Because when you do not identify as a black person, then you're going to see black people from another country
Yeah.
as a different people. That's why it's important that I ask, are you black or Dominican first? Because if you say Dominican, I will make complete sense of why, although those are your people, you
Yeah.
come from the same root. On that video that I shared yesterday, there was a Dominican guy and he said, Ricardo, you don't understand that Haitians have invaded us. You wouldn't understand this. And I said, Spaniards invaded you. Do you want them deported too? And he responded, he said, but they didn't come here illegally. They invaded, they kidnapped you from West Africa and forcefully brought you here and enslaved you here. And you're talking about, but they don't come here legally? So I find it interesting that when I ask a Dominican, are you black or are you Dominican first? I'm Dominican first, mama huevo. So you are siding with the colonizer, with the offspring of those who enslaved you. All this because of why? Because the offspring of your colonizers identify as Dominican and have tricked you to identifying as Dominican also. So now because you are identifying with the same identity as your colonizer, now you are teamed up with your colonizer to go against your actual people. That's why it was easy for me to respond, I'm indigenous first.
Yeah.
Because ain't no white man ever gonna pin me against an indigenous person of Guatemala, El Salvador, Peru, Puerto Rico. You will never be able to do that to me. But you see, that's why it's important to know who you are. If you don't, you will be tricked by the idea of colony. And you will even side with your colonizer and identify as your colonizer and join your colonizer to go against your own people from another country.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we dive into the hottest topics and break them down. Today we are talking about a statement that has sparked debates for years. I am not black, I am Dominican. What does this mean? Why does it stir up so much emotion? And how are people reacting to it? Let's get into it. Alright, this phrase I am not black, I am Dominican often surfaces in conversations about race and identity, particularly within the Afro-Latins community. It encapsulates complex issues of history, culture, and self-perception. While some people see it as an assertion of national pride, others interpret it as a denial of African ancestry. This phrase has sparked passionate debates online, leading us to examine the layers of identity, the role of colonialism, and influence of a model-day racism in shaping how people see themselves. To truly understand why some Dominicans might say I am not black, we need to consider the cultural and historical context of the Dominican Republic. The island of Hispaniola, which the Dominican Republic shares with Haiti, has a long colonial history involving Spanish and French colonization, African enslavement, and indigenous genocide. Over time, these influences created a racial mixed population, blending African, European, and indigenous ancestry. In the Dominican Republic, national identity is often closely tied to language, Catholic traditions, and cultural practices. These elements form a sense of pride that Dominicans distinguish from other racial or ethnic categories. For many, identifying as Dominican is less about race and more about emphasizing cultural uniqueness. However, we can't ignore the role colonialism has played in shaping racial perceptions. During colonization, there was a clear racial heritage that placed lighter-skinned individuals at the top and black Africans at the bottom. This legacy of colorism persists today, not just in Dominican Republic but across Latin America. One example of the influence is the infamous dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, who ruled the Dominican Republic for over 3 decades. Trujillo actively promoted anti-Haitian sentiments and downplayed African roots in Dominican identity. He favored the illustrative image of the nation, which encouraged Dominicans to view themselves as separate from blackness. This historical backdrop helps explain why some Dominicans today may struggle to fully embrace African ancestry. Fast forward to the present, and the phrase "I am not black, I am Dominican" reflects these historical complexities. On one hand, it can be seen as an attempt to center Dominican identity in a world that often oversimplifies racial categories. After all, race is not defined the same way everywhere. In the US, for example, the one-drop rule has historically categorized anyone with African ancestry as black, but in the Dominican Republic, racial identity is more fluid with terms like Moreno, Indian, and Trigueño, describing a wide range of skin tones without necessarily associating them with blackness. On the other hand, critics argue that this phrase reveals internalized racism and a reluctance to confront African roots by rejecting blackness. Some believe that individuals are perpetuating anti-blackness and failing to honor the rich African heritage embedded in Dominican culture, seen in music like merengue and bachata, religious practice, and even traditional foods. The debate around this phrase has taken social media by storm. Supporters of this phrase argue that it is not about denying African roots, but rather affirming Dominican cultural identity. Comments like "being a Dominican is about our food, our music, and our history" often highlight these perspectives. These individuals believe they are celebrating their unique blend of influence, which cannot be fully captured by the term black. Critics, however, push back strongly, calling it an erasure of African heritage. Tweets and TikToks have pointed out the hypocrisy of enjoying African-derived cultural expressions like Afro-Dominican hairstyles or rhythms, while distancing from a black identity. One viral TikTok even said, "How can you not see blackness when it's literally in your DNA and your everyday life?" The internet reaction haven't just been about education, it's also about fueled hormone. Memes mocking the phrase often shows images of visibly black Dominicans juxtaposed with captions like saying, "I am not black, I am Dominican," illustrating the irony many see in this statement. This discussion isn't just about Dominicans, it speaks to the broader issues within the Afro-Latins community and beyond. In many Latin American countries, there is a tendency to downplay African ancestry in favor of celebrating indigenous or European roots. This reflects a global issue of anti-blackness where black identity is seen as something to be minimized or denied. It also raises questions about solidarity among marginalized groups. Some Afro-Latin individuals argue that rejecting blackness harms efforts to build unity among people of African descent. If we can't acknowledge shared roots, how can we address shared struggles like systemic racism or colorism? At the same time, it's important to respect that identity is deeply personal. People have the right to define themselves, and for many Dominicans, emphasizing their nationality over their racial identity is a way of reclaiming pride in their unique heritage. So where does this leave us? The phrase "I am not black, I am Dominican" is more than just a statement. It's a lens through which we can examine history, identity, and race. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about colonialism and the ways we define ourselves. Ultimately, this debate reminds us that identity is not a one-size-fits-all concept. It's shaped by history, culture, and personal experiences. While we may not all agree on how to label ourselves, discussions like this one open the door for deeper understanding and connection. What do you think? Is this phrase a rejection of blackness, or is it simply an affirmation of our Dominican pride? Let me know your thoughts. I did love to hear from you. Alright, thank you for watching, and let's continue this conversation in the comments below. Let's share our thoughts and perspectives with one another. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on this story and more. I will see you in the next video.